Part 126. Blessed to have each other in this life, Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1259. That's true. Annoyed, Chu Mingjun scratched his hair and sighed. It's a pity that no evidence of Li Shiyu's affair was found. Yeah, Li Shiyu's doubts are very serious. Think about it, a woman is pregnant, but her husband spends every day flirting with all kinds of women in that kind of pornographic chat group. Even if he doesn't cheat physically, it's hard to accept emotionally. If Li Shiyu wanted to punish her husband, it would be a breeze. When everyone agreed, Zhang Xi poured cold water on them, but we can't imagine a murderer in court. There was a sudden silence in the living room, and everything withered. Zhang Xi's eyes fell on Mu Ziyi, who had been silent all this time. What about you? What do you think? Zhang Xi asked her. Mu Ziyi raised her eyes slightly, thought for a while, and looked at everyone. Tomorrow I will be the first to speak. The first witness is the police officer in the case. Xiaoming will be in charge of the interrogation. Don't directly show the police's incompetence. Try to attack from the side as much as possible to let the jury know that there are many doubts in the case. Understood. Chu Mingjun nodded. I will let him know how outrageous his work mistakes are. Xiao Chen, you are in charge of the psychiatrist. Mu Ziyi said, try to use easy to understand language so that the jury can understand it. Got it. Xiao Chen raised his hand. I'll be in charge of Li Shiyu's interrogation and the closing statement. Speaking of this, Mu Ziyi stood up slowly, looked at everyone and said, if the situation is not clear, I will emphasize the accidental nature of the case in my closing statement, and try to change the sentence of homicide into accidental manslaughter. We lack strong evidence, and we don't have enough witnesses to prove Ge Feng's innocence, but I still hope that in court tomorrow, we can take every step calmly and firmly believe that Ge Feng is innocent. Because only by believing in him, can we believe that all the efforts we are making now are valuable and meaningful. Everyone looked at each other and nodded in unison. Mu Ziyi said, everyone has worked hard these days, take a good rest tonight and recharge your spirits. Chu Mingjun led the lawyer away. Zhang Xi stayed at Mu Ziyi's house recently, so she stayed and tidied up the scattered materials in the living room with Mu Ziyi. She was addicted to cigarettes. Mu Ziyi didn't allow her to smoke at home, so she could only take a stroll outside to take a few puffs. It is now late September, the summer heat is still there, the evening breeze is cool, and the mosquitoes outside the house are more ferocious than in midsummer. When Zhang Xi was smoking, she was bitten on her face and arms a few times, and her mood became more and more depressed. She threw away the cigarette butt and trotted back. Mu Ziyi is looking at the photo. Zhang Xi leaned over and asked, any new discoveries? It's nothing, I just saw an acquaintance. Mu Ziyi pointed out the person in the photo to Zhang Xi, this is the client in my last case, named Xin Lan. After deciding to investigate Li Shiyu, Mu Ziyi sent someone to follow Li Shiyu for a while. Her idea was simple, if Ge Feng's feeling was right, and Li Shiyu had indeed had an affair, and conspired with the other party to frame Ge Feng, then the case was about to be retried, and the two would definitely be connected. But Li Shiyu's life is very regular, going to bed early and getting up early, taking regular walks, and the only few times she goes out is to go to the hospital for prenatal checkups. Zhang Xi looked at the photo and said, it's a gynecologist. The photo is a private hospital. Li Shiyu and Xin Lan are sitting on a bench in the hospital garden, chatting about something. Mu Ziyi shook her head, no, Xin Lan is a surgeon. It seems that she was not in a hurry to go abroad, but was hired to this private hospital. As for why I met Li Shiyu, I don't know. Zhang Xi threw the photos back into the information bag, sorted out the other scattered documents, and said to Mu Ziyi, you should go to bed earlier, if this continues, my goddaughter will have no milk to eat. The reality is really cruel, stress and anxiety will make breast milk significantly less. Musa smiled weakly, okay, I'll go to bed, good night. The world is unpredictable, I really didn't expect it, I have written 6 chapters and haven't finished this small plot, what should I do? I will continue to write, you guys go to bed early, don't follow along. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1260. Muzi I was indeed tired. Fortunately, there is someone to help with the case, and the child is considered well behaved, otherwise it would really be too much. She went upstairs to take a simple wash and fell asleep, and soon fell into a deep sleep. There was no dream all night, and it was dawn when she opened her eyes again. Dawn means the beginning of a new day and the start of war. Musa's nerves, which had been loosened due to adequate rest, tensed up again. The child was still sleeping. Muzi I got up lightly, washed and changed, put on light makeup, and went downstairs to have breakfast. Zhang Si I had already gotten up, sitting at the dining table, with a piece of toast in her mouth, without dipping in jam, and was eating bit by bit. Morning, Zhang Si I greeted, still staring at her phone. Muzi I passed by her, and occasionally glanced at Zhang Si's phone screen, which showed an extremely revealing photo. Muzi I froze, and asked in astonishment, what are you looking at? I joined that group. Zhang Si I flicked her mobile phone and said, it's the disbanded Rose Covenant, what is it called? Love Rose now. I woke up this morning and saw the group message 99, I flipped through it, tisk. The group leader is here again planning to build a new group, saying that it is to prevent people from being reported next time. Watching this early in the morning, aren't you afraid you won't lose your appetite? Muzi I was quite speechless. Those pornographic photos are really disgusting. Wait for me to take a screenshot and leave a piece of evidence. Zhang Si I chuckled, when your case is over, I will report both groups. The phone clicked and clicked a few times. Zhang Si I put down the phone and continued to eat breakfast. While eating, chatting. Do you really believe that Black Rose will be in the chat group? Zhang Si I asked. Why don't you believe me? The group is full of wretched men looking for resources. The portrait given by the crime expert in my heart said that Black Rose should be an elegant gentleman, a perfectionist, with mild obsessive-compulsive disorder. If you say an elegant gentleman, you will join such a chat group. Muzi I chewed the food slowly and thought for a while. The chat group can be changed. Muzi I said, the group name, group introduction, and all information can be edited at any time. Maybe Rose's Covenant was not a chat group for pornographic topics before, but someone wanted to change it. That's true. Zhang Si I nodded while eating toast, just upload some resources, and then go to the adult forum to advertise, it will attract people to join the chat group, and then set up a new administrator, give up the position of the group leader, and the old members will leave the group in time. It won't take too long, the group will soon have a new look, and no one will know what this group was used for before. Zhang Si I said with emotion, it's really a good way to get away without anyone noticing. After sighing, Zhang Si I felt wrong again, frowned and muttered, if you want to cover it up, why don't you just disband the chat group? Why bother to reform the chat group? The disbanded group cannot be recovered, and even the police have difficulty tracking down the members, files, and chat records of a disbanded chat group. If it is disbanded, it will become an eternal mystery. Where there is a mystery, people will persevere in pursuing the answer. Muzi I sighed softly, but if the entire chat group is changed, people will have the answer, and those who have the answer, will not continue to get to the bottom of it. The case of Black Rose will be brought out for investigation every once in a while. For the murderer, this is definitely a knife hanging around the neck. Even if the knife may not fall down, it will still make the murderer worry about it. But if Ge Feng's charges were confirmed and he became the scapegoat of Black Rose, then the case would be over, forever. Zhang Si I frowned and thought, and said suddenly, didn't it happen that a policy was announced half a year ago? The statute of limitations for criminal cases has been extended from 10 years to 20 years. The two looked at each other, and both saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Musei murmured, "Black Rose wants to do it once and for all. I hate myself, sleep and write tomorrow." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life, Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1261. Trial begins Tuesday. Guo Chang spoke first. He faced the jury, showing a piece of physical evidence. The razor that cut He Ya's throat. Blood and hair found in the basement. Carriage loaded with dead bodies. And a photo of He Ya, a young and energetic female college student. The defendant, Ji Feng, and the victim, He Ya, had a long-term ambiguous relationship online. The police found hundreds of pages of chat records on the defendant's computer. Ji Feng met He Ya while there was no one at home, and then brutally killed her. In this trial, we will show you the chat content between the defendant and the victim, and introduce evidence to prove when, where, what tool the defendant used, and how he attacked the victim. The voice was sonorous and powerful, and when he sat down, he took a deep look at Musei. Musei got up calmly, and said, "A young girl was brutally murdered. This is an undeniable fact. We should be angry and condemned, but Ji Feng should not be condemned because he is innocent." Ji Feng knew He Ya well. Ji Feng has indeed kept in touch with He Ya on the internet for more than a year. Yes, that's right, only on the internet. Ji Feng has never met her, let alone hurt her. I stand here and repeatedly emphasize Ji Feng's innocence. I don't want you to ignore the vicious nature of this case. On the contrary, I very, very hope that you can witness a fact, that is, when we confront Ji Feng here, when Feng made baseless accusations, the real murderer was at large. Both sides finished their speeches, followed by cross-examination. The first witness was the police officer in charge of the case at the time. After we received the report, we rushed to Feng Tinjiayuan and found a woman's body in Ji Feng's back compartment. Afterwards, we searched Ji Feng's home and found the deceased's handbags and clothes. The ID was found in the handbag and the identity verification was carried out. Guo Chang asked him, "Besides this, what else did you find?" "We found blood stains in the basement, and there was a bloody razor in the trash can. It was determined by the forensic doctor that the razor matched the wound of the deceased. The test results also confirmed that the DNA in the blood was exactly the same as that of He Ya. In addition, He Ya's fingerprints were found in many places in Ji Feng's home." "Did Ji Feng explain this?" Guo Chang asked. The police officer replied, "He said he did not know the deceased, had never seen the deceased, and expressed no knowledge of what happened." Guo Chang smiled lightly, turned his head to look at Musei, and continued to ask, "Is what he said true?" "We collected fingerprints on the deceased's ring," the police officer said. "It matches the defendant Ji Feng." "Thank you." Guo Chang nodded slightly, returned to his seat and sat down. Musei looked at Chu Mingjun beside him. "Are you ready?" Chu Mingjun nodded, got up and walked towards the witness stand. "Hello, Mr. Police Officer," Chu Mingjun asked politely. "Excuse me, what did you do when you found the body in the trunk?" "We made an urgent arrest of Ji Feng," the police officer replied. Chu Mingjun asked, "Maybe someone else put the corpse there?" "That's unlikely." "Why is it unlikely?" The police officer replied, "Because we found the murder weapon and blood stains in Ji Feng's house. After identification, the first scene was in the basement of that villa. At that time, only Ji Feng was at home in the villa." "Is there any relevant evidence to prove this?" Chu Mingjun asked. The police officer shook his head. "No fingerprints were found at the murder scene other than the deceased, the defendant and his family. But if someone really wants to blame the defendant Ge Feng, of course the real murderer will be careful not to leave his fingerprints. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1262. The police officer frowned slightly. This is unlikely. Mr. Police Officer, I noticed that you have been using the word possibility since just now. When I said that maybe someone else put the body in Ge Feng's trunk, you said it was unlikely. When I said there was another hiding alone in the villa, you said it is unlikely. Chu Mingjun smiled slightly, looked at the police officer on the witness stand, and asked, a young girl who went out to meet friends in the middle of the night turned into a corpse the next day, do you think it is very likely? The police officer frowned deeply, his face a little ugly. Did the police reduce their search efforts for other clues because the possibility was small? Chu Mingjun asked. The police officer replied in a deep voice, of course not, we have investigated this case comprehensively and rigorously. Comprehensive investigation, Chu Mingjun nodded slightly, then, have you investigated the chat group Rose Covenant? My client and the victim, Ms. He met in the chat group, and both of them have a lot of love. Ambiguous objects, have you checked all these people? Check some, the police officer said. Some, Chu Mingjun asked, how much do some mean? 2 or 3? 4 or 5? Or more than 10? The chat group disbanded quickly, and the users were all using virtual screen names. We didn't have time to confirm everyone's identity information. Chu Mingjun nodded thoughtfully, it's really too difficult to find out everyone's information, so how about it, Mr. Police Officer, tell me about the people you found. The police officer was silent and did not speak. What? Chu Mingjun asked him, you just said that you did some research. The police officer took a slow breath and replied, after investigation, we believe that the defendant Ge Feng is seriously suspected. What kind of investigation made you come to this conclusion? Chu Mingjun asked, did you not investigate other people at all? We investigated. Then please name the other suspects you are investigating. The result of our investigation is that Ge Feng is the biggest suspect. Mr. Police Officer, please name the other suspects. Those people were all ruled out of suspicion after investigation, and your client is the ultimate murderer. Okay, I still want to know the names of the other suspects. Chu Mingjun was calm. The police officer took a deep breath, then exhaled heavily, and replied word by word, your client is the biggest suspect. Where's the security guard that night? Chu Mingjun returned to the table and pulled out a document. He arrived at Fengtinjiayuan at 10 o'clock, and the security guard also shifted at 10 o'clock in the evening. After that, have you checked the security guard's alibi? The police officer said with a sullen face, we asked, and the security guard went home to sleep. Chu Mingjun smiled, oh, is that so? My client said that he was sleeping that night. You think it's just making up a story? The security guard said he went home to sleep. Do you believe it? Objection, Guo Chang stood up. Let me change the question. Chu Mingjun said, there is a person named TJ in the chat group, who has a close relationship with He Yat. The content of the chat has repeatedly involved pornography, violence, death, and other topics, and threatened He Yat. Once she betrays herself, she will pay a heavy price. Have you investigated this person named TJ? The officer replied, he sent this message to many people. Chu Mingjun asked, so you didn't investigate this person's alibi on the night of the crime? The police officer was sullen and did not speak. Chu Mingjun approached and looked at the police officer, you have identified Ge Feng as the murderer, so you didn't spend any more time investigating other suspects, right? The crime scene is at Ge Feng's house. The murder weapon is Ge Feng's razor. The deceased's ring has Ge Feng's fingerprints. The police officer suppressed his anger and said in a deep voice, Mr. Lawyer, do you think the truth is not clear enough? Maybe it's clear enough, Chu Mingjun said calmly, but if he was really wronged, then you are an invisible accomplice. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1263. Chu Mingjun returned to his seat. Xiao Chen and Xiao Zheng were excited and gave him thumbs up. Chu Mingjun sat down beside Mu Ziyi, and smiled at her. Is it okay? Mu Ziyi also smiled. Well, it's much better than before. They gained a small advantage in the questioning of the first witness. The second witness was Ji Feng, psychiatrist, and also a defense witness invited by Mu Ziyi. The psychiatrist could not testify about the night of the crime, but he could testify about Ji Feng's mental state. I.e., sex addiction. Internet sex addiction means having sexual fantasies about the opposite sex or phantoms in the virtual world. It is a kind of addictive behavior, such as smoking addiction, alcohol addiction, etc. Can you explain to us the cause of this mental illness? Xiao Chen asked. The psychiatrist said, there are many causes, most of which are the outlets for negative emotions. It may be due to excessive long-term pressure, or incomprehension, or unsatisfied sexual desires, or it may be that children did not get enough in the process of growing up. Love. Doctor, as you can see, the image of my client in the chat records is extremely corrupt and dark, and words such as sex, death, violence, and abuse are mentioned many times, which is quite different from his image in real life. Do you think this is it normal? Patients vent their emotions and pressure through online chatting, showing a completely different side, which is a normal phenomenon. In fact, many patients behave very evil on the internet, but in the real world they have decent jobs, stable families, and ordinary people no difference. So do you think he's going to put what he said in the chat into action? No, as I said just now, he just uses this behavior as a vent to release pressure. No matter how shocking he said during the online chat, it is just venting and will never be substituted. Reality, because once it's plugged in, it's no longer a way to decompress, it's a way to supercharge. Got it? No one wants to add to the pressure. Thanks. After Xiao Chen finished asking, he returned to his seat. Guo Chang got up and asked the psychiatrist, may I ask how many patients you have treated so far? The psychiatrist was stunned for a moment. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Is Mr. Ji Feng the most serious of all your patients? It's not. The psychiatrist replied, it can only be considered moderate. Doctor, I want you to recall carefully, among all your patients, has anyone ever put their assumptions into practice? The psychiatrist hesitated. Maybe. Guo Chang asked again, can you guarantee that among the hundreds or even thousands of patients you have treated, none of them have committed a crime, and they will never commit a crime in the future? The psychiatrist's face changed slightly, he pursed his lips and remained silent. Can you guarantee it, doctor? Guo Chang asked again. The psychiatrist slowly shook his head. No. Guo Chang smiled coldly, looked towards Mu Ziyi, and said to the psychiatrist, that's a pity. If you could, I'd probably bring all the rapists in the prison to you for treatment. Mu Ziyi looked indifferent, not accepting the provocation in his eyes. After the adjournment, both parties withdrew temporarily. In the living room, everyone was silent. The second witness did nothing to make the atmosphere somber and heavy with oppression in the air. Ji Feng held Li Shiyu's hand, and the couple talked in a low voice. Mu Ziyi looked at them, thought for a long time, and said, Ji Feng, you don't need to appear in court for a while, I will let your wife appear in court directly. Ji Feng was slightly stunned, and looked at Mu Ziyi, but you said before that I must appear in court to explain all this in person, so that the jury can believe that I am not guilty. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, Your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1264. There are advantages and disadvantages. Muzi said, it is true that you can appear more sincere when you explain in person, but at the same time you have to face cross-examination by the prosecutor, and the other party will expose all your outrageous words and deeds on the internet. You have nowhere to escape, and the jury's impression of you will be greatly reduced. Ji Feng frowned, contemplated, and finally nodded. Okay, I'll listen to you. Muzi looked at Li Shiyu. Are you ready? Li Shiyu pursed her lips and looked at Ji Feng, and finally nodded slightly. Ji Feng's calm mood suddenly became agitated. He held Li Shiyu's hand tightly and said, in case the lawsuit is lost, there will be no accidents. Li Shiyu comforted him gently. My child and I will wait for you to come out. Ji Feng's eyes were red, and he lowered his head. If the death penalty is really carried out, and even the life is gone, what is there to talk about? There is no chance of coming out at all. Muzi hoped that Li Shiyu could help Ji Feng and prove his innocence, but first, Li Shiyu had to pass the cross-examination. If, like a psychiatrist, he falls into a trap with a few words and is easily defeated by the other party, then all previous testimony will be in vain. It's not easy. Because people like prosecutors and lawyers are best at pushing people into corners with words, not to mention Li Shiyu, a weak and non-aggressive woman. Muzi knew that he shouldn't place too much hope on her. The first question Guo Chang asked Li Shiyu was extremely embarrassing. When you were pregnant, you knew that your husband was having a fiery love affair with another woman. How did you feel? I can't believe it, Li Shiyu replied softly. He is a person who strives to make progress. He usually watches business news and football matches the most. I didn't expect him to have such a habit. You didn't expect him to bring women from outside to the house, did you? Guo Chang asked. Li Shiyu subconsciously looked at Ji Feng in the dock, and replied, there must be some mistake. He is not a person without measure. Isn't he a man without measure? Guo Chang smiled. Ms. Li, do you think you know him well? He's my husband, we've known each other for 7 years. You have known him for 7 years, but you don't know that he hangs out with women in porn chat groups. Guo Chang asked her, so, do you still think you know him? Li Shiyu pursed her lips, and said in embarrassment, even so, he would not kill people, he is not that kind of person. Guo Chang's eyes were cold, and he smiled. He can't kill people? So what are these? He suddenly held up the photo of He-Ya's throat cut. The bloody visual impact made Li Shiyu subconsciously turn her face away, frowning and raising her hands to cover her lips, showing great discomfort. Guo Chang was still asking, Ms. Li, when you see these photos, do you still firmly believe that your husband didn't kill anyone? Chu Mingjun became anxious, and lowered his voice to remind Muzi quickly object. Muzi was startled. She stared straight at Li Shiyu on the witness stand. She seemed to be in a daze. Even though Chu Mingjun yelled several times, she still didn't respond. Chu Mingjun was so anxious that he couldn't take care of anything else, so he stood up and shouted, no. Your Honor, considering the special physical condition of the witness, please end the prosecution's oppressive interrogation of the witness immediately. The judge nodded slightly and looked at Guo Chang. Prosecutor, please pay attention to the questioning method. Disdain appeared in Guo Chang's eyes, and he said proudly, Your Honor, I'm done asking. Does the defense have any questions? The judge asked again. However, Muzi did not respond. Chu Mingjun was at a loss. He didn't understand what happened to Muzi at all. The judge was suspicious. Defense lawyer. Chu Mingjun stretched out his hand and gently pushed Muzi. Muzi finally regained consciousness. She got up slowly and approached Li Shiyu step by step. Unbelievable, Muzi said, so it's really you. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1265. Li Shiyu was stunned. What? The suspicion in Mu Zi's eyes settled down little by little, and finally became as silent as a pool of water without any ripples. Just now in the waiting room, I saw you and Ge Feng shaking hands. At that time, I actually felt a little guilty. Musa looked at her and said slowly, because I saw the stamp on your finger that you wore a ring on Mark. This shows that during Ge Feng's 6 months in prison, you still wore your wedding ring. Knowing that the hope of her husband's return is slim, but still wearing a wedding ring, how can she have no affection for her husband? I have been suspecting that you are having an affair. Li Shiyu frowned slightly. Mu Zi lowered her eyes, and her eyes fell on her slender fingers. But, if you really have feelings for your husband, why did you take off the wedding ring? I was thinking just now, maybe you forgot to wear it? But, just now, I found something wrong. Mu Zi raised her left hand. On her own ring finger, she wore a delicate platinum wedding ring. The wedding ring should be worn on the ring finger of the left hand, right? Mu Zi looked at Li Shiyu and smiled faintly. If ordinary people get it wrong, it's understandable. After all, not everyone understands this, but your home jewelry business, it is impossible not to know this. Ms. Li, why did the indentation of the ring appear on your middle finger? What is the meaning of wearing it on the middle finger? None of these questions had anything to do with the case. A delicate atmosphere permeated the courtroom, and no one interrupted. Even the prosecution showed a puzzled look and did not raise any objections. Li Shiyu frowned slightly, and clasped his hands together to cover up the not-so-obvious indentation. Mu Zi stood quietly in front of her and smiled suddenly. There was a bit of surprise, a bit of relief, and a bit of embarrassment in the smile. Ge Feng said that he has never met He Ya, but He Ya's ring has his fingerprints on it. Mu Zi asked her softly, the ring on He Ya's hand is actually yours, right? There was an uproar in the court. People were astonished and chattered eagerly. Li Shiyu's lips were tightly pressed together, her gentle smile could no longer be held back. What are you talking about? I don't understand. No, you understand, Mu Zi said. Maybe one night, you put on the ring and let Ge Feng hold your hand, and then you can easily get a ring with Ge Feng's fingerprints on it, but this ring is very important to you, or it has a different symbolic meaning, so you make another one for yourself, wear it every day, and only take it off when you go out to visit. Li Shiyu shook her head lightly, and said softly, there is no evidence for what you said. Ge Feng joined that chat group. Was it planned by you? Mu Zi looked at her calmly. Why is the ring of black rose so important to you? Li Shiyu didn't speak. Mu Zi took a step closer and looked at her fixedly. Such an important ring, will you always carry it with you? Ms. Li, can I check your bag? There was finally a crack in Li Shiyu's peaceful demeanor. She squeezed the small handbag hanging on her wrist tightly. Conflict and vigilance poured out of her eyes. Mu Zi looked at the judge. Your Honor, I request that the witnesses' bags be inspected in court. You have no right to do this. Li Shiyu stood up abruptly. Everyone looked at her. Mu Zi replied indifferently, you replaced the ring, sent an invitation to He Ya in the name of Ge Feng, then gave the servants a holiday, and you also moved into your mother's house, just to create opportunities for the murderer. Who is your accomplice? You're talking nonsense. It's all nonsense, Li Shiyu was angrily. Mu Zi didn't give in at all. To show your innocence, maybe you'd like to let me take a look at your ring now. It should be clear at a glance whether it's a wedding ring or a black rose ring. You. Li Shiyu's expression was suddenly painful. She arched her waist, and tightly clutched her protruding belly. Mu Zi's face changed drastically. Call an ambulance. She's about to give birth. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1266. Li Shiyu had a sudden attack, and the trial was interrupted. A group of people rushed to the hospital. Li Shiyu showed signs of dystocia and was immediately pushed into the operating room for a cesarean section. Mu Zi, Chu Mingjun, and others were waiting outside for news. At this time, Guo Chang came to Mu Zi and stretched out a hand to her. "How did you guess that?" Guo Chang spread his hands, revealing the black rose ring on his palm. "It's not guessing, it's speculation." Mu Zi took the ring from his hand, put it in front of her eyes, and observed it carefully. Black Rose needs someone to be the scapegoat, so this ring must appear in He Ya's hand. LOL body, throat cut, coupled with the same ring, only in this way can a link be made to the previous victim. "Your guess is not entirely correct," Guo Chang said. "The ring on He Ya's hand was copied by Li Shiyu. Li Shiyu's own ring has never been given away." Mu Zi raised her eyes to look at him, and asked, "Did Li Shiyu explain?" Guo Chang shook his head lightly, and stepped aside. Mu Zi saw Xian Lan standing there quietly with a smile on her face a few steps behind Guo Chang. Guo Chang said, "Ms. Xian has already surrendered. As a condition of explaining the case, I promised her that I will wait until Li Shiyu's delivery is over before arresting her." Guo Chang walked aside, leaving space for Xian Lan and Mu Zi to get along with each other. At the end of the corridor, several police officers were guarding here, looking here from time to time. Xian Lan sat down beside Mu Zi, exhaled lightly, and smiled. "I didn't expect that," she said. Mu Zi looked at her quietly, and finally nodded. "Yeah, I didn't think of it either." Mu Zi handed the ring in her hand to Xian Lan, and asked, "Does this ring have any meaning?" "A ring is just a ring, so what meaning can it have? Even if it has a certain meaning, it is something that is forced by people." Xian Lan took the ring, put it on her hand leisurely, and admired it. "Rose represents love, no matter what it's red, it's white, it's yellow, it's black, it's all about love." "Do you love her?" Mu Zi asked. "Yeah," Xian Lan responded in a low voice, and said with a smile, "Everything is good when we are together, the only regret is that we can't have a child, so we plan to have a child, and then take the child to go abroad together, settle down and never come back, but..." She smiled and sighed, "However, this matter is much more disgusting than I imagined. That man tried to use the child in my stomach to pinch me, which really gave me a headache. Within a few months, Shuyu was also pregnant. Only one child is enough. She asked me if I want to kill it. How can I be willing to let her suffer that? I said, no, the one in my stomach, I don't want it." Mu Zi was in a daze after hearing this. No wonder, even 7 months old can be ruthless enough to have an abortion. "Do you regret it?" Mu Zi asked her. "Even if Li Shiyu is not directly involved, it is considered a conspiracy, and she will be punished by the law. Your dream of going abroad and settling down will probably stop here." The smile on Xian's face was faint, and she shook her head indifferently. "One must have an adventurous spirit in this world. However, all the risks you take are based on other people's pain." Mu Zi said, "If Ji Feng dies, Li Shiyu gets rid of a man, you get rid of the suspicion of the Black Rose case, and you gain love, freedom, and a child. You plan carefully and are very greedy. Happiness without sacrifice is a gift from God." Xian Lan looked at Mu Zi with a smile. "Gifts are not always available. Most of the time, happiness requires us to step on other people's bloody wounds to get it. Situ Mu Zi, you too." Mu Zi pursed her lips tightly, her eyes became dark. Under her current happy life, there are also tragedies buried. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life. Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1267. Li Shiyu gave birth to a lovely daughter. When she found out that it was her daughter, Li Shiyu's expression was a little sad. Xian Lan was by her side, gently put the rose ring on Li Shiyu's middle finger, held her hand and asked, "Don't you like girls?" No. Li Shiyu shook her head slowly, and said softly, "I just feel that women always have many shackles in this world, so it's better to raise a boy, so that you can be free and easy." Xian Lan smiled, non-committal. Guo Chang led the police officers to stand outside the door and waited. Xian Lan leaned over and touched Li Shiyu's forehead lightly, saying, "I'm going." Li Shiyu was silent, and after a long time, she nodded, "Yes." Xian Lan let go of her hand, tucked the sheets for her, stood up calmly, and left the ward with Guo Chang. In the ward, only Li Shiyu and Mu Ziyi were left. Li Shiyu, who had just had a cesarean section, was haggard, with no extra emotions visible on her pale face. This indifference made her somewhat similar to Xian Lan. I don't know if she learned from Xian Lan, or she had such a personality in the first place. Mu Ziyi said to her, "According to relevant laws, Xian Lan should be sentenced to life imprisonment or death penalty. You are an accomplice. The maximum sentence is life imprisonment, and the minimum sentence is 20 years. However, you have just given birth and will breastfeed for 12 months. Execute outside the term of prison, and continue to serve the sentence after the breastfeeding period is over. If you have any objections, you can contact a lawyer to protest, understand?" "Well, I understand." Li Shiyu returned to a gentle and calm appearance. "The matter has come to this point, and the two have nothing to say." Mu Ziyi got up and was about to leave, but when she walked to the door, her steps faltered. She turned around and looked at Li Shiyu. "Why did those two women die?" Li Shiyu raised her head. "They chose to go to another world to be together, so we send blessings to them both." "You," Mu Ziyi was shocked, "you helped them commit suicide?" Li Shiyu smiled faintly, "Yes, they didn't suffer much when they died, don't worry." After finishing speaking, he smiled again, and said in a teasing tone, "I didn't expect it to be treated as a serial murder case. It's amazing that there are still people imitating the murder." Mu Ziyi stared at her in a daze, recalling Black Rose's tattoo and Black Rose's ring, so, they are a pair. From this point of view, the chat group where Xian Lan and Li Shiyu belonged was supposed to be a gathering place for a special group at first, but after the murder happened, under Xian Ian's gradual operation, the chat group completely changed its appearance. Although the former members have left, Black Rose has become an unsolved case. If the truth is found out, everyone will be implicated. Not only the crime of assisted suicide, but more terrifying is the damage to their reputation. The families behind them will be deeply involved and difficult to get rid of. Most people's acceptance of homosexuality is very limited. Even in open foreign countries, there is still discrimination. Muse's mind was filled with many thoughts, and it was chaotic for a while. At this moment, the phone rang suddenly. She answered the phone, heard the other person's words clearly, her eyes widened suddenly. "What? She committed suicide? How could Xian Lan commit suicide? Where did the scalpel come from? Why didn't the police handcuff her hands? How could she have the chance to commit suicide?" All these questions rushed to his lips in an instant, but Mu Ziyi couldn't ask a single word. She raised her eyes and stared straight at Li Shiyu on the hospital bed. What she saw was Li Shiyu's calm and indifferent face. "You already knew?" Mu Ziyi asked her in disbelief. Li Shiyu raised her hand, gently kissed the black gem on the ring, closed her eyes and murmured, "We will always be together." Mu Ziyi took a deep breath, walked out the door, and said to the police officers guarding outside, "Li Shiyu has suicidal tendencies, keep a high level of vigilance, and people entering and leaving must ensure that they are not carrying dangerous knives." Looking at the woman on the hospital bed one last time, Mu Ziyi bit her lip and left the hospital quickly. "Okay, the case of the Black Rose is over. I'm afraid you'll hold back for too long, so today's update is in advance. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1268. Chapter 1268. In fact, the reason is very simple, to make the dramatic conflict more intuitive. I recommend you a court debate game Ace Attorney. Almost all murderers in every case in the game are witnesses. Why is there such a setting? Because the protagonist must have an attack target in court. Attacking, winning, generating a sense of accomplishment, ending this is a very smooth rhythm. But if you don't set a target, readers will lose focus and be confused when reading it, and it's hard to feel refreshed when it's over. But who should be the target of the attack? There are only 4 roles in court: judge, prosecutor, witness, and lawyer. According to the current requirements, the image of national civil servants cannot be damaged, so we only have, well, witnesses. Every time it is a witness, there is indeed a lack of surprises, so I work hard to innovate. For example, in Ning Yue's case, the murderer was not a witness. For example, in the broker's case, the murderer was not a witness. For example, in the case of the president's brother-in-law, the murderer was not a witness. Therefore, it is not my laziness that the witness becomes the murderer, it is the normal state of all court scenes. Then I will explain the case of Black Rose, because many people can't understand it, probably because I didn't write it clearly. Once upon a time, there was a lesbian chat group. The lonely small group kept each other warm. After a long time, everyone became deeply attached to each other and formed a couple of lovers. The attacker got a tattoo, and the receiver wore a ring. Actually, I don't know that lesbians don't distinguish between offense and suffering. One day, a pair of lovers in the group couldn't survive in the real world, and wanted to die together, and they wanted to die exactly the same. Xin Lan led a group of friends to hold a funeral for them. The water temperature in the bathtub was higher, and the body was soft after soaking. Then let Xin Lan perform an incision. It didn't hurt at all, and the death was very comfortable. Sprinkling flower petals is also quite romantic. Don't ask what do I think, I also learned from foreign films. As a result, the police kept investigating, which was really annoying. Although the dead were voluntary, Xian's behavior was legally equivalent to murder, so in order to get rid of it once and for all, Xin Lan created a third murder case, asked Ji Feng to take the blame, and by the way, killed her lover. Rescue from marriage, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so witty. As for why He was chosen, it can only be said that she was unlucky and was hooked up by Ji Feng. Xin Lan will kill whoever Ji Feng hooks up with. Okay, now you understand? If you still don't understand, it doesn't matter, you can pretend to understand. Oh, by the way, there is no update today.